Following the 2019 legislative session, Senator Warren Limmer, chair of the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, said, "We have successfully funded our courts, prisons, and law enforcement and taken additional steps to reform broken programs for victims who are often forgotten." He joins me now to elaborate. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
Let's start with your quote. Who are the victims who are often forgotten?
I believe that the victims that we're talking about are those who are sexual assault victims throughout the state. We have heard plenty of stories about women who feel that they have been neglected in criminal investigations when they've pointed out to the abuser or the rapist by name. They point to the person where they live, and over a number of years, police have not fulfilled their full investigation duties. And in addition to that, there's a historic story that's emerging for the past year and a half, and that's about a historical record with murdered and missing Indigenous women. Women who are part of our Indian communities, our Native American communities. They feel also that the investigations of women who have been murdered or just plain have disappeared over the last 30, 40 years have not been investigated as well.
So let's talk briefly about the Sexual Assault Task Force. The legislature is creating this task force that's going to look into the problem that you outlined that was brought forth by a Star Tribune series that showed, I think, almost 25% of sexual assault cases victims feel are not handled appropriately. What kind of reforms do you think this Sexual Assault Task Force might highlight?
Well, I think first, law enforcement will tell you and prosecutors will tell you these cases are very difficult to prosecute. Oftentimes there is not evidence. Oftentimes there is not a recollection exactly of what occurred or who did it. Oftentimes alcohol is involved. Then you have the stigma of bringing a victim through a court system and then getting pummeled by a defense bar. Very difficult, but at the same time, I have to ask the question, is there any other area of crime that has a 25% failure to prosecute? And especially in this type of crime, this intimate assault on someone's body as well as emotions, 25% is unacceptable. And so we started to look at where the police responsibilities have begun and where they have failed. Or is there a pattern of behavior that just is assumed by perhaps a line officer at the time of taking down notes and they fail to move it on to a prosecutor's office? These are all issues that need to be questioned. We began that questioning, but we thought that a task force might be necessary. Bring in victims, bring in prosecutors, bring in law enforcement, bring in the defense bar, and make sure that we're adequately doing our responsible job for anyone who is a victim on this type of brutal crime.
And you also mentioned the missing and murdered Indigenous women. There's a task force now to look at that. You called the stories that you heard during public testimony overwhelming. What do you hope will result here?
Well, I think we need to expose some sunlight to this whole issue. It seems like it's been in the shadows for many, many years. A lot of these Indian tribal communities are in distant locations. They're outstate. They don't have a large law enforcement contingency around these areas. Is that the problem? Is it a failure of resources? Is it a failure of will? And I think that has to be known. When I first started learning about this about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I was rather amazed that there are missing women, there are murdered women, there are children that are also victims, and they just kind of disappear. And law enforcement doesn't seem to have a lot of, well, if you listen to the victims' families, they will say that law enforcement doesn't have a sincere desire to pursue an investigation. That cannot happen in this state. We are not going to allow that. The task force, I'm hoping, will bring a little more sunshine to this issue. And then we can respond even further.
Let's turn to the new positions for the Department of Corrections. It's been known for a while that there's staffing needs there. There's funding for 67 new guard positions, but there's almost as many vacancies due to retirements, promotions, and job changes. As a former corrections officer, what's your pitch to people who might be interested in this line of work, especially considering our tight job market?
Well, there's a lot of people that want to go into criminal justice jobs, whether it's law enforcement, corrections, perhaps it's into probation work. You really get a good grounding when you start working and walking a cell block with, let's say, 150 male felons, with you as being the one and only correction officer overseeing that type of community. You really learn about politics there. And you also learn a lot about diplomacy. The job, if you want to be safer on the job, be diplomatic. Build a relationship. It's not you versus them. You're both in the same box and you have to make everything work. But it also is a great resume builder if someone wanted to build that into that law enforcement direction, or in criminology, or perhaps someone wants to get some real life experience, get an added degree and you can become an adjunct professor fairly easily, or go on even further for a full doctorate. Lots of opportunities can come from that, and their pay is going up, and there's openings. So if you have any background at all or interest in law enforcement, criminology, corrections, now's the time to pursue it.
Good time to enter that career pathway. There were other important policy changes that had to do with sex crimes in this bill. Can you outline just a few of them?
Well, I actually wrote them down. We focused on sexual assault investigations, sexual conduct crimes, as well as predatory offender registration. We increased some sentencing for child pornographers. We created an enhanced penalty for surreptitious intrusion, meaning kind of like a peeping Tom, but involving a minor with sexual intent. There's some really crazy people out there, and sometimes their desire to view a young child through a window creates more of a desire, and oftentimes it evolves into a physical attack. And we want to make sure that if that type of activity is going on, we want to react to that quick before it develops into something else later on. And we didn't have any type of law that addressed that type of issue. We expanded the definition of position of authority. Position of authority is best described by an example. If you're a teacher with a young child, you have an assumed position of authority. Later on, when it's an adult versus a teenage girl in high school, that position of authority can still be rather powerful in a relationship. And we did have that position of authority go beyond or up to 90 days. It was to cover a school summer vacation, so that individual adult could not use that position of authority for 90 days. We discovered that in some school districts, a school break goes beyond 90 days. So we went to 120 to make sure that we have that clear. And we also prohibited peace officers from engaging in any type of sexual conduct while an individual is in their custody. You may have heard about the buttocks bill.
Yes, the butt bill. Yes.
Senator Marty brought that forward, and as well as Senator Lane. That is, mores are changing, and what might have been considered a swat on the butt by a coach to get a kid out to the playing field is now considered a little bit more of a taboo, and we're responding to that as well. Just don't do it.
Just don't do it.
Pat them on the head, slap them on the back.
There you go.
Keep everything above the base.
There you go. Senator Limmer, it was a very productive session, and I look forward to having you back as we prepare for the next one in February. Thank you so much.
You bet.